Truck crashes are often sudden, catastrophic, and unfortunately, all too deadly. From runaway rigs barreling down highways to massive collisions in busy city streets, these accidents can leave lasting scars on communities and families. Some crashes are horrifying not just for the numbers, but for the sheer chaos and tragedy they bring. The stories behind these accidents reveal human error, mechanical failure, and sometimes sheer bad luck, all culminating in devastating consequences. In this piece, we'll explore some of the most disturbing truck crash deaths ever recorded, examining the events, the aftermath, and the lessons that can be learned to prevent future tragedies. On the early morning of May 13, 1972, a routine journey along the U.S. Route 11W near Bean Station, Tennessee, became one of the deadliest highway disasters in American history. A Greyhound bus carrying dozens of passengers was traveling east through a narrow, two-lane stretch of road when it attempted to pass a slower-moving vehicle. At the same time, a westbound tractor-trailer loaded with asphalt approached from the opposite direction. With little room to maneuver and almost no warning, the two vehicles collided head-on. The force of the impact crushed the front of the bus and ruptured the truck's cargo, triggering an intense fire that spread within moments. The crash scene turned chaotic almost instantly, with flames, smoke, and twisted metal trapping many passengers inside the bus. 14 people were killed, including both drivers and 12 passengers, while several others suffered serious injuries. For those who survived, the moments after the collision were filled with terror as they struggled to escape the burning wreckage, making the tragedy not just deadly, but deeply traumatic for everyone involved. What made the Bean Station crash especially haunting was the road itself. U.S. Route 11W already carried a grim reputation long before 1972, often referred to by locals as Bloody 11W, because of its history of serious and fatal accidents. The highway was narrow, lacked a median, and handled heavy truck traffic, creating dangerous conditions that left little margin for error. Sharp curves, limited visibility, and frequent passing attempts turned everyday travel into a gamble. The Greyhound crash felt less like an isolated incident and more like a breaking point that exposed long-standing safety failures. Survivors later described the overwhelming heat of the fire, the screams of fellow passengers, and the helplessness of being trapped while rescue crews worked desperately to reach them. Emergency responders arrived quickly, but the intensity of the fire and the mangled wreckage made rescue efforts extremely difficult. The scene underscored how vulnerable passengers were when large vehicles collided on poorly designed highways, especially before modern safety standards and emergency response protocols were fully developed. News of the collision spread rapidly across the United States, with newspapers and television reports calling it one of the worst bus-truck crashes in the nation's history. Public reaction was swift and emotional, particularly in Tennessee, where anger grew over why such a hazardous road had been allowed to remain unchanged for so long. Investigations later concluded that the disaster resulted from a combination of factors rather than a single reckless act, including risky passing on a two-lane highway and the absence of physical barriers separating opposing traffic. The crash became a powerful symbol in debates over highway safety, infrastructure investment, and transportation policy. Over time, it helped push lawmakers and transportation officials to take road design more seriously, leading to improvements in traffic regulations and long-term plans to upgrade dangerous highways. More than 50 years later, the Bean Station bus-truck collision is still remembered not only for the lives it claimed, but for the lessons it left behind. It stands as a sobering reminder that major tragedies often come from risks that are known but ignored, and that road safety is not just about individual decisions, but about the systems and designs meant to protect everyone who travels. On the morning of 5 September 2013, what began as a routine weekday commute in Pinetown, KwaZulu-Natal, quickly turned into one of South Africa's most devastating road disasters. The area around Fields Hill, a long and steep descent notorious for challenging truck drivers, was busy with traffic as commuters headed to work, school, and daily errands. A heavily loaded freight truck was making its way down the hill when, according to reports, it suffered catastrophic brake failure. The driver struggled to control the massive vehicle as it picked up terrifying speed, and by the time the truck reached the bottom of the hill, it was unstoppable. Traffic at a red light waited in vain as the runaway truck bore down on the intersection. Cars, minibuses, and taxis were tightly packed together, filled with ordinary people going about their lives, completely unaware of the impending disaster. Within seconds, the truck smashed into multiple vehicles with overwhelming force. Vehicles were crushed, flipped, or pushed aside, some almost unrecognizable under the weight of the collision. The scene was chaotic, with twisted metal and shattered glass scattered across the road, and bystanders watched in horror as the scale of the accident became apparent. The speed and force of the truck left no chance for the people inside the vehicles to escape, and the incident shocked the entire community, who would remember that morning as one of unimaginable tragedy. Emergency responders were confronted with an overwhelming scene. Firefighters, paramedics, and police worked frantically to free trapped victims from the wreckage while dealing with burning vehicles and unstable debris. Many people were severely injured, some with life-threatening trauma, and hospitals in the surrounding area were stretched to their limits as medical staff treated burns, broken bones, and internal injuries. At least 27 people lost their lives, although some reports suggested that the number could have been higher, and more than 80 others were injured, many with permanent disabilities or life-altering injuries. Families frantically searched for missing loved ones amid the chaos, and eyewitnesses recounted scenes of panic, screams, and desperate attempts to help strangers. The community was left shaken, and the incident dominated news coverage for days, highlighting not only the human cost, but also the dangers posed by poorly maintained heavy vehicles and treacherous road conditions. Relief efforts were immediate, but insufficient to fully address the trauma experienced by survivors and witnesses, many of whom described the sound of the crash as deafening, like metal tearing apart and glass shattering everywhere. The aftermath was heart-wrenching, with funerals, memorials, and vigils for the victims that drew attention from across the province. Investigations into the crash revealed serious concerns about road safety, vehicle maintenance, and regulatory oversight. Authorities examined whether the truck had been properly inspected and whether mechanical failure alone or negligence contributed to the catastrophe. The driver was arrested and charged with multiple offenses, including culpable homicide, as officials sought to determine responsibility. Beyond the legal consequences, the Pinetown truck crash became a symbol of how quickly life can be shattered by preventable disasters. It prompted discussions about stricter vehicle inspections, better driver training, and infrastructure improvements on dangerous roads like Fields Hill. Years later, the tragedy remains a somber reminder of vulnerability on the roads and the ripple effects such events have on families and communities. Many victims were breadwinners and parents, leaving gaps in families and workplaces that could never be fully repaired. Memorials continue to honor the lives lost, and the crash is cited in road safety campaigns and engineering studies as an example of the deadly combination of heavy vehicles, steep descents, and mechanical failure. It is a painful lesson in how a single moment, a single mechanical failure, can have irreversible consequences, and it remains etched in the memory of South Africa as one of the most tragic road disasters in its history. On the evening of 27 August 2022, the small Dutch hamlet of Zuidzijde in South Holland experienced a tragedy that shook its close-knit community to its core. What was meant to be a cheerful summer barbecue for local residents, including families and friends of the new Bayerland Ice Skating Club, turned into a scene of horror when a truck veered off the dike road and crashed directly into the party area. The unexpected violence of the incident left people in disbelief, with neighbors watching helplessly as chaos unfolded before them. The truck struck several people indiscriminately, killing 7 individuals, including a pregnant woman whose unborn child was later counted among the victims. Beyond the fatalities, multiple others suffered serious injuries, some life-altering. The immediacy of the disaster, paired with the intimate scale of the village, meant that almost everyone knew someone affected. Emergency responders arrived quickly, but despite their efforts, the magnitude of the crash had already left an indelible mark on the town. Families, friends, and first responders were left grappling with grief trauma, and the question of how a joyous summer evening could end in such devastating loss. As investigations began, the focus quickly turned to the driver of the truck, a Spanish national in his late 40s who had been arrested at the scene. Initial reports revealed traces of cocaine in his blood, sparking widespread media coverage and intense public debate about substance use and road safety. However, the case was far more complicated than a simple matter of intoxication. Later investigations suggested that the driver may have suffered an epileptic seizure moments before losing control of the vehicle. This revelation added layers of legal and ethical complexity, highlighting the responsibilities of drivers with medical conditions and the challenges authorities face when determining accountability. Dutch prosecutors argued that the driver should not have been operating the truck due to his medical condition, while defense teams considered the seizure a critical factor that reduced his culpability. This combination of human error, medical condition, and potential substance influence turned the accident into a cautionary tale about the risks inherent in transporting heavy vehicles and the need for rigorous safety regulations, training, and oversight. The aftermath of the Zuidzee crash has continued to resonate within the Netherlands and beyond. Court proceedings culminated in 2025, with the driver receiving a prison sentence of just over 3 years, alongside a driving ban, reflecting both punishment and acknowledgement of mitigating circumstances. Beyond the courtroom, the community has sought ways to honor the victims, establishing memorials and commemorations to remember those whose lives were abruptly and tragically cut short. The accident prompted broader conversations about road safety near public gatherings, awareness of medical conditions for professional drivers, and the role of substances in preventing responsible operation of heavy machinery. While the statistics of 7 deaths and several injuries are stark, the human stories behind those numbers underscore the depth of loss. Friends, family members, and neighbors whose lives were irrevocably changed in a single instant. Zuidzee's tragedy serves as a sobering reminder of how quickly ordinary life can be disrupted, and it stands as a call for vigilance, compassion, and preventive measures to avoid similar heartbreak in the future. On a Sunday afternoon in Missouri, a stretch of Interstate 55 near Festus, already narrowed and slowed by ongoing construction, became the site of a devastating tragedy when a tractor-trailer failed to reduce speed and collided with multiple vehicles, resulting in the deaths of 3 people and serious injuries to at least 5 others. The crash involved 8 vehicles in total and unfolded with terrifying speed, turning what should have been an ordinary drive into a scene of chaos and heartbreak. Emergency responders arrived to a scene of twisted metal, shattered glass, and displaced vehicles, working methodically to extract trapped passengers while simultaneously managing the shocked and grieving survivors. The truck driver later told authorities that he may have dozed off, a statement that underscored the fragility of life on the road and the immense responsibility carried by those operating large commercial vehicles. The victims were ordinary people caught in extraordinary circumstances, their lives abruptly ended or forever changed in a single, preventable moment. News outlets shared details about the victims, their personal stories, and the rescue operations, emphasizing both the scale of the disaster and the human toll it caused. The collision left a profound mark on the community, raising urgent questions about safety in construction zones, the enforcement of speed limits, and the protocols designed to protect both workers and drivers. Local residents expressed shock and frustration, some highlighting the visibility of warning signs and the design of the work zone, while others emphasized the human factor, the attention, alertness, and judgment required when navigating high-speed traffic in potentially hazardous conditions. Legal proceedings quickly followed, with the truck driver facing multiple counts of involuntary manslaughter, highlighting the accountability that comes when negligence leads to the loss of life. The incident also prompted discussions about the pressures faced by commercial drivers, including long hours, fatigue, and the demands of maintaining schedules, and how these factors can contribute to tragic outcomes when combined with high-speed traffic and constrained roadways. For those who witnessed the aftermath, the memory of the crash, the sound of impact, the sight of wreckage, and the urgency of first responders remain vivid, a reminder of how quickly normal routines can be shattered. In the days and weeks following the crash, families, community members, and officials reflected on what could have been done differently, from better signage and slower construction zone speed limits to stricter monitoring of commercial driver fatigue. The tragedy underscored the intersection of human error, mechanical responsibility, and infrastructure safety, revealing that even a single lapse can have irreversible consequences. Above all, the Missouri I-55 crash serves as a sobering reminder that the road is a shared space where vigilance and caution are essential, and where the ripple effects of one moment of inattention can be felt far beyond the immediate scene, affecting families, friends, communities, and first responders who bear witness to the aftermath. The incident emphasizes that life can be unexpectedly fragile, and that maintaining awareness, following safety regulations, and respecting the risks inherent in both driving and managing traffic in work zones are crucial to preventing preventable tragedies from recurring in the future. On July 22, 2025, the roads near Chitungwiza, Zimbabwe, became the site of a devastating tragedy when a haulage truck lost control and veered into oncoming traffic, colliding head-on with a minibus taxi in a catastrophic crash that claimed the lives of approximately 17 people. The victims, including passengers in the minibus and pedestrians struck moments before the collision, were ordinary Zimbabweans going about their daily routines, people on their way to work, school, or errands, whose lives were suddenly and brutally cut short. Eyewitnesses described scenes of chaos and horror, with twisted metal, shattered glass, and overturned vehicles marking the spot where the collision occurred, while survivors and bystanders struggled to comprehend the sheer scale of the disaster. Emergency responders arrived promptly, but the severity of the crash meant that many victims had already died at the scene, while others suffered life-altering injuries. The minibus, carrying far more people than it was safely designed to transport, was completely crushed by the truck's immense force, highlighting not only the vulnerability of passengers in smaller vehicles, but also the ever-present dangers on Zimbabwean roads, where reckless driving, overloading, and poor infrastructure continue to contribute to high rates of fatal accidents. Local authorities launched investigations immediately, pointing to driver error and potential mechanical failure as factors. But the incident also sparked a broader conversation about road safety nationwide, with religious leaders, politicians, and community members urging stricter enforcement of traffic laws and greater public awareness to prevent such tragedies in the future. Families of the deceased were left to mourn in shock and disbelief, and communities gathered to support one another, while media coverage detailed the human cost of the crash, showing that behind each number in the death toll was a life full of potential, plans, and relationships abruptly ended. The Zimbabwean government faced pressure to act, reviewing regulations on commercial trucking and minibus operations, calling for better training, stricter licensing, and more rigorous safety inspections. But for many, these measures could offer little solace in the immediate aftermath of the disaster. The Seke Road tragedy served as a grim reminder of how fragile life can be, and how quickly routine moments can turn into irreparable loss, leaving scars not only on survivors and families but also on the collective consciousness of the nation. The crash underscored the urgent need for road safety reforms and a culture of responsibility among drivers, while honoring the memory of those whose lives were tragically ended in a matter of seconds on that fateful day. In reflecting on the accident, it became clear that while investigations and policy changes could address systemic issues, the human toll, including grief, loss, and emotional devastation, remained profound. The disaster revealed that accidents of this scale are more than statistics. They are deeply personal tragedies that demand both action and remembrance. Communities, authorities, and individuals were called upon to recognize the importance of cautious driving, proper vehicle maintenance, and strict adherence to traffic regulations. Beyond policy, the incident left a lasting mark on Zimbabwean society, emphasizing the importance of valuing human life, prioritizing safety over convenience, and acknowledging the fragility of each daily journey. In honoring the victims, remembering the tragedy, and implementing reforms to prevent future disasters, Zimbabwe faced the dual challenge of healing the emotional wounds while creating safer roads for generations to come.